Hey everyone, Raptor Spank here, and today we have Metacheck July 23rd. This is part of my new thing I'm doing, where I'm doing a Metacheck one week and on the grind the next week. But this is the show where we look at the meta decks I've been playing, and some decks that I think are a little bit interesting going forward. So first off, didn't end up playing as much ranked as I would like to. Admittedly, because I spent way too much time over this past week playing Lab of Legends. I really did. I have been desperately trying to grind out the last few remaining champions and get all of my icons, and I'm still trying to make it there with Shyvana and Pike, but we've gotten all the rest now because I was starting to fall a fair bit behind on that. So I've spent a lot of this week doing that, but started to get back into ranked again, playing a number of different decks that I tried. We didn't really play any more of Fizz TF, although I did see some kind of interesting brews of that deck where people were running like Dreadway and just going heavier into the damage route rather than the nab package, which is probably the better way of playing the deck. But I thought about it, but instead there was a lot more other decks that kind of caught my eye, and they're all in Ionia. No. That's not true. I played some Fizz Noxus as well, but big deck I'm playing right now, Zed Sivir, because these are two of the most underappreciated champions who have never... Well, Zed had his time in the sun way back in beta. As people know, like, longtime viewers of the channel are probably aware, I play IF Elusives every single ranked season. I've already done it on this season. I haven't even hit Diamond. Usually I play it in Diamond. I'll probably play the deck again in Diamond when I do get there. But since then, Zed's seen very little to no play, and Sivir's kind of always been the underappreciated champion. So this deck is a really neat deck that makes both of them very, very good. And so this is kind of like the best either one of them's ever been. So I just couldn't resist playing the deck. So that's what I've played probably the most of, because I've kind of been playing a bunch of different decks, but only got 6 games in on this, and I ended up going 5-1 with the deck. And the one loss was me being a colossal idiot, in which I had Young Witch out, and I had Ruin Runner out, and I had Flurry of Fists, which is a nuts instant win combo, even against the deck that I was against, which was Fizz Noxus. They didn't have enough damage to kill me in hand, but I kind of spoofed in my own head, was like, wait, it's not doing enough damage to kill my opponent, which it was. They were at 8, I believe, and so the 6 from Ruin Runner, plus the 1 from Young Witch, plus the 1 that Young Witch gives to Ruin Runner would have been lethal, which would have forced my opponent to block, which would then allow me to cast Flurry of Fists to give Ruin Runner double strike and instantly win the game. I panic, forgot what I was doing, cast Flurry, and then Ruin Witch messed up the order, so it just gave Quick Attack twice, which does nothing. So that one lost game, like, there was nothing my opponent could have done. If I actually did the combo right, I win the game right then and there. So I just lost that game to being bad, which is kind of a great example of the deck. I've beaten LeBlanc Sivir. I've beaten Akshan Sivir with Targon, which was a little bit weird. But, like, LeBlanc Sivir, Shen Jarvan, Deep Monsters, all of these are real meta decks. Deep Monsters being the most fringe of which. And I won all of those. And honestly, they've been pretty one-sided. I mean, I get a little bit low on health, but I mean, like, I'm building this crazy board state that just runs my opponent down relentlessly. Like, going low in health's really not that big of a deal. And honestly, some of the times I've just kind of still been making misplays with the deck. Like, against the Shen J4, they went down to 1 mana, and if I cast the Waking Sands in hand and then swung, I would have killed them, but for some reason I thought I had to be more careful, and so I swung first. And then I was like, wait a minute, if I just cast Waking Sands, he's dead. So that was a mistake I made at one point, but I mean, I still won the game, but yeah, that was a bit rough, that I missed it there and gave him a whole nother turn, but funny enough, they actually had the 5/6, the new thing, the new Cloud Drinker that doesn't do the Cloud Drinker effect, but it looks the same. They had that, and they used Spirit's Refuge on it twice, both times also having a Concerted Strike to go with it. so they gained an obscene amount of life, and I still killed them, which was really, really sweet. And that's kind of the coolest part about this deck, is when you get that crazy, like, you get the super fast Zed kill where you give him double attack out of nowhere and your opponent just dies, or you have the really crazy turn where you get the leveled up Sivir, you give her Overwhelm with, like, the Absolver and then Flurry of Fists, and now all of your units have double attack and Overwhelm and Spell Shield. It's ridiculous when it happens. It's one of the coolest wins to get in the game, so really been enjoying the deck. I highly recommend it. 83% win rate, should be 100% over the 6 games if I wasn't an idiot, but very, very fun deck. Definitely what I've spent the most time, and I'm going to continue playing this going forward as well, because it's just really, really fun. There's a couple other decks I wanted to talk about as well that I didn't end up getting around to playing like I had hoped, or playing as much of. I played a few normals, that sort of thing, but didn't actually play mid-ranked like I intended originally. But overall, look at the meta. Ionia is doing amazing right now. Obviously, Shurima's also having quite a resurgence, since we're seeing a lot of, like, Shurima Burn, or LeBlanc Sivir, or the Ionia Shurima decks, of which there's a billion. And we're going to talk about 2 more of them, to be honest. So, you know, it's just, yeah, Shurima's in a great spot right now. Ionia's in a great spot. In fact, we are talking about entirely Ionia. I forgot about that. Entirely Ionia Shurima decks this week. But there are non-Ionia decks, there are non-Shurima decks that are getting played and doing well. I've heard some people have some luck with Deep Monsters, which is mind-blowing to me. I know Cosmic shouted it out on Twitter, which got my hopes up, so I tried it, but there's the Fizz Noxus deck that's bad. I think I need to play it a little bit more to say for certain, but I was not impressed with it in the games I played. And I love Fizz. I really want to find another Fizz deck that works so I can work on Mastery with him, because he's my favorite champion of all time. But yeah, that deck did not feel great, but I think it's mostly because it's just out-power crept by most of the other decks. It's not... It has those crazy powerful turns, and I did have one really, really sweet turn in which I killed someone by buffing one of my flyers to like 7 power and then playing a Runed Reckoner and giving him a free attack and then swinging with the team and killing my opponent. That was really, really cool. But yeah, it seems very inconsistent, or certainly less consistent than the other big decks in the meta right now. There is still, like, Shurima Noxus Burn, which is, there's Shurima Noxus Burn, and then there's also, Shurima Noxus, like, LeBlanc Sivir 5-power tribal. I have heard a bit of Frostbite mid-range. Shen Jarvan's still getting played a bunch, so that's still out there as well. I saw Teemo Ezreal deck, that was kind of neat, although we absolutely decimated it, so I wouldn't really say that's meta. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of options you can go for right now, and it just kind of feels like you're racing your opponent's combo and trying to be a bit faster, which can be a little frustrating, admittedly, but I've personally been enjoying it. I really like Ionia being good again, because Ionia was always my favorite region, but mostly because it gives you a lot of opportunities to really test your skill, which is kind of what I really like about it, because it does have a lot of things like, you know, oh, Will of Ionia is going to have so many different uses. You can bounce your own thing, you can bounce their thing, and so I love those kind of cards, and Ionia has a lot of that stuff that lets you really think, and it has some of the more, like the Zed Sivir deck has some of the more interesting Shurima cards as well, with, you know, Profiteer giving you lucky finds and stuff like that, but just in general, I'm kind of enjoying the meta right now a little bit more than I was enjoying the meta at the end of last season, but who knows if I'll still feel that way after playing a few more games. It might be one of those things that, you know, feels really great right now, but once you get a bunch of games in, it might feel pretty bad. I've heard a lot of people complaining about Lee Sin, so that's understandable too, but I haven't had too many issues with the Lee Sin deck, and that's mostly because the Targon one was super oppressive, whereas, like, the Shurima one's not as oppressive, it's just really powerful, because the Absolver is just insanely strong, especially in a Lee Sin deck, because giving stuff Overwhelm at burst speed, not even like focus speed, it's burst speed, so you can do it at any point in response to what your opponent's doing. Like, that's just nuts. That's so much value you get out of that. So, yeah, it's powerful. But yeah, let's talk about the decks this week. Let's jump straight into the meat and potatoes. Some of the decks that I'm finding interesting right now. First off, let's take an updated look at Azir Irelia, because I saw this very spicy list that I believe it was Swim put up that had a one-of card that I saw and immediately scoffed at, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know, honestly, it's probably really cool, and I definitely want to try it. And I haven't really gotten many ranked games in on it yet because I've been enjoying Zed Sivir too much, and so I played a ton of this deck last season, so wasn't really looking to play it a bunch. But Field Musicians in Azir Irelia is a really neat piece of tech that I'm kind of excited to try out, because spell mana can be so useful for us, especially with all these new spells getting tossed in, like Defiant Dance and the one of Rite of Calling, which I also kind of scoffed at first, and then I realized, you know, it actually is pretty strong, because the deck does get a lot better once you have your champions, and it's a lot worse without your champions. So having a guaranteed way to find either Azir or Irelia is really, really good. We have a lot of things that can be sacked to it easily, with like Dunekeeper giving us a Sand Soldier. So there is a lot of things we can use this on that doesn't hurt us that much to get these cards, and I kind of like the idea of now trimming the Inspiring Marshals, because they were so expensive that it was hard to play them and do other powerful things. So it just really, they were starting to get a little too wonky to use. So I very much like this list, the idea of it. I'm still not overly sold on Defiant Dance, but I've seen it be used to fairly decent effect by other people, so I have it in the list here, but I'm still not 100% sold on it. But deck is really, really sweet. It's obviously still very powerful, and as the meta's shifted a little bit more into the new expansion, this deck seems to be in a much better spot than it was at the start of the expansion. So it's starting to get back into the point that you can actually run Azir Irelia and have a decent chance. So one of the decks I'm looking at, it plays exactly the same as it did before, though. You're still the aggro deck, no matter what, even with the changes. You're still looking to kill your opponent as quickly as possible before they can really set up too much of a board state. So the ways you play, the matchups, the mulligans, those really haven't changed much. It's the same deck, we just kind of shifted around some of our cards for some other really, really powerful stuff. So that's Azir Irelia. Jumping into one of the new decks, Akshan Lee Sin, or Akshan, I forget how it's pronounced, but the Lee Sin deck, people have been talking about it. My version's a little bit different because most people seem to be running Concussive Palm, but I love Will of Ionia. I was so happy when they reverted the change that I'm just kind of forcing it into my version, and I know some people have talked, like Alan's Q mentioned how he would, like, Will of Ionia was something you could swap for the Concussive Palm, depending on what your personal preference is, and I always love Will of Ionia. It has some really great blowouts for opponents that I really, really love having that be an option, although it does give us less units on the ground, which is kind of concerning, but otherwise, it's still, it's just, that's kind of my tech of it, but mostly this is the list most people are running, is just swap the Will of Ionias for Concussive Palms. The big thing here is, your number one goal is really to slam a Lee Sin and kill your opponent with it, but there's a lot of different combo things you can do too. You can very quickly level up Akshan and the Warlord's Palace and Horde. You can get that kind of turbo boosted because of Vakar and Vagabond, which is why we're running the 3 copies of Shapestone with 0 landmarks in the deck. It's because we have 6 units that create landmarks, which is really, really good. Tasty Faithful kind of helps to sort of bring us back, since we're not very good into aggro, in the sense of, like, if you look at it, we have just those 3 followers and 2 champions, and that's our only units on the board, especially since I'm not running Concussive Palm. But Tasty Feyfolk's life gain really helps to kind of negate that disadvantage, because especially if you can do things like Twin Discipline or Absolve or stuff like that to keep it alive, it's going to gain you a ton of life over the long run, so that's really, really strong. Eye of the Dragon can do similarly, but we can be very aggressive with the Shurima side of things, and then we have this crazy late game win condition in slamming a Lee Sin, casting Absolver on him. You're hoping to level him up anyways so you can get the Dragon Kick. So if he's leveled up already, then your Absolver is going to give you the Overwhelm. And again, unlike Zenith Blade, we can do this all at burst speed, so your opponent doesn't even know until it's too late, and they can't even counter it. All they can do is remove Lee Sin in response, or deny the trigger for him, and none of those things are particularly great or particularly feels good. So that's really, really solid. The downside here is we don't have the spell shield in theory. We do have ways to create lucky finds that can find a spell shield, but we don't have the main board like Bastion to give us spell shield to protect our combo. But we can combo off a lot quicker, because even if we're not getting all these gems and spells to like pump our Lee Sin's power, we can just go like Absolver, which gives you +4 right then and there, and the Overwhelm. So we don't have the permanent buffing our champions, so if they can answer our combo, we're really blown out because our Lee Sin's not getting bigger over time, but we are a lot faster, and that's the sweet part of the deck. So basically, you're looking to eventually win with a combo plan, but kind of you shape your hand to what your opponent has. Lee Sin combo is going to be exceptionally great against Demacia mid-range decks, so it's really, really good there. Obviously, Eye of the Dragon with spells, or Tasty Feyfolk just in general, is good against aggro. And then against kind of control decks, you're looking to win fairly quickly, but just keep in mind you can always just Lee Sin kill your opponent eventually, especially if you have Deny up and Notify to just keep your stuff alive. So just kind of play a little bit defensively, but also a little bit aggressively, where you're trying to kill your opponent before they get to whatever their crazy late game win condition is, essentially. And that's the big Shurima Ionia episode that we had. I hope you enjoyed this meta check and the new format that I'm doing for this. I might be changing things up a little bit over time too, maybe bring in more decks since I'm doing this every other week now, and maybe dive a little bit more into the meta as well. I was kind of hoping to do that a little bit this week, but as I said, I didn't end up playing that much ranked. I played a lot more Lab of Legends, so not really a ton of point to be talking about Lab of Legends. Lab doesn't usually get many views or many interest, so not a lot worth talking about with that. So kind of a weak meta check this time around. It'll be better on the next one, I promise, because I'll be putting way more ranked games in. I'm planning to put way more ranked games in even going into this week as well. Just have those last 2 Lab of Legends to finish, so that should not take too much time, knock on wood. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more card game related content.